The sun had barely risen over the small village when Amina stepped out of her modest home, her eyes still heavy with sleep. But there was no warmth in her morning today, no laughter or shared whispers. Her life, once filled with the comforting presence of her husband, Zahir, felt suddenly hollow. They had built a quiet life together, one stitched from small rituals that only the two of them understood. Morning tea shared in the soft sunlight, the gentle brushing of hands when passing in the corridor, the evenings spent talking about dreams too fragile to voice aloud. These simple moments were the threads that bound their hearts. Zahir had been everything to her, steadfast, tender, alive in ways that made even the ordinary feel extraordinary. Amina could still feel the rhythm of their lives together. The way he hummed softly while cooking, the gentle pressure of his hand guiding hers as they tended their little garden. Life in those days had seemed eternal, predictable in its small joys. And then, in a single devastating instant, it was gone. The news arrived like a jagged knife through her chest. Zahir had died. An accident, sudden and cruel, leaving no time for goodbyes. Amina remembered the moment she saw his lifeless form, how the air seemed to freeze around her, how the world kept moving while her heart shattered. There were screams trapped in her throat, tears that refused to stop, and a silence so profound it seemed almost alive, pressing against her ears. Days merged into nights in a blur of grief. Amina moved through her home like a shadow, her hands carrying out chores almost mechanically, her eyes vacant. She could still see Zahir's smile in every corner, hear his laughter echoing faintly in the walls. Every familiar sound and scent, coffee brewing, the wind rustling the leaves, the smell of clay and earth outside their door, brought with it a dagger of longing. The villagers whispered their condolences, but words fell flat against the magnitude of her sorrow. Alone in her grief, Amina found herself wandering near the old stone hearth at the edge of the village, the place where elders told stories of fire. Fire that could burn away the boundary between life and death, fire that could be fed with love and loss alike. She had never believed in such tales, dismissing them as old wives' whispers. But now, her heart clung desperately to the idea of anything that might bring him back, even a fragment, even a shadow. The legend spoke of a ritual mysterious and dangerous, one that demanded sacrifice and faith, a fire fed not just with wood or herbs, but with longing, hope, and memories. Amina sat by the hearth, staring at the blackened stones, and felt a stirring of something she had not known in days, a fragile, trembling thread of hope. Could the fire truly answer her grief? Could it return what fate had stolen so cruelly? The thought terrified her, yet also ignited a spark she could not ignore. Her mind wandered through memories of Zahir, his touch, his laughter, the way he had made ordinary life feel magical. And in those memories, she found the courage to consider the impossible. The loss was still raw, still aching, yet beneath the pain was a glimmer of resolve. Perhaps, just perhaps, the fire could give her back her husband, or at least the chance to try. And so, in the quiet loneliness of her sorrow, Amina's journey began, a journey that would blur the line between love and loss, between hope and danger, between life and the mysteries that lingered just beyond the reach of ordinary understanding. Days passed, yet Amina's world remained heavy with emptiness. She moved through her home like a ghost, touching objects that once carried Zahir's warmth. Each plate, each cup, each folded piece of cloth seemed to whisper his absence. The villagers, wary of disturbing her grief, gave only soft nods and murmured condolences. But one afternoon, as Amina stepped out to fetch water, a quiet murmur drifted toward her from the marketplace. They say the fire can bring back the dead. An old woman whispered to her companion, her eyes darting nervously. But it's dangerous, it demands something of you. Amina froze, the words striking like lightning. She tried to shake them off, telling herself it was just another superstition, a tale the elders passed down to frighten children. Yet, The seed of possibility had taken root in her heart. Her nights had been filled with dreams where Zahir smiled at her from the flames, calling her name, reaching out as if he had never left. Could it be true? Could she reach beyond death and call him back? Curiosity, desperation, and grief collided inside her. She began asking questions quietly, careful not to draw attention. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the ritual, their voices trembling. "It's called feeding fire," one said. "You gather what he loved, what binds his spirit, and place it into the fire with your faith. But beware, it is not without cost." Amina's heart pounded. She imagined Zahir's favorite scarf, his worn journal, the wooden flute he played for her on quiet evenings. Each memory burned brighter in her mind than any flame she had ever seen. Yet doubt gnawed at her. Could it really work? Was it right to disturb the natural order? Was it even safe? The idea of meddling with death terrified her, but the thought of life without him was a torment too great to bear. Late at night, Amina would sit by the hearth, tracing her fingers over objects once belonging to Zahir. She could almost hear his laugh, feel the warmth of his hands, and every time, the whispers from the villagers returned, curling around her mind like smoke. The ritual demanded not just items, but intent, sacrifice, and faith. One misstep could bring disaster, they warned, yet the possibility lingered like a flickering flame in the dark. Her nights became restless, haunted by vivid memories. She remembered how Zahir used to hum softly while cooking, the way he would ruffle her hair when she laughed, the quiet moments when they shared secrets beneath the stars. Every detail of him, the scent of his clothes, the gentle curve of his smile, made the emptiness inside her grow sharper, more unbearable. And then, one evening, she heard it again. The same old woman speaking to a group of villagers outside the edge of the forest. "Only those who truly love can feed the fire," she said. "And only those willing to risk everything may glimpse the impossible." Amina's breath caught. Could she risk everything for a chance to hold Zahir again? Could she confront fear, superstition, and the unknown to reclaim her life? Or at least, what remained of it? The thought terrified her, yet hope, raw and fragile, blossomed in her chest. She spent days preparing in her mind, imagining the ritual step by step. She pictured placing Zahir's beloved items into the flames, whispering words of longing and love, feeding the fire not just with wood, but with her heart itself. She could almost feel the heat of the fire on her cheeks, almost hear Zahir's voice answering hers. At first, she tried to dismiss the idea, calling it folly. But the pull of her grief was stronger than logic. She thought of the life they had shared, the love that had filled her soul, and the unbearable void his absence had left. She remembered the legend. The fire listens to those who dare to hope, but it is merciless to those who falter. Finally, a choice crystallized in her heart. She would attempt the ritual. She would feed the fire, not knowing if it would grant her Zahir back, not knowing if it would demand a price too great to bear. But she could not live without trying. The thought of never holding him again was a pain more excruciating than fear or uncertainty. As she set her resolve, the air seemed to shiver around her, as if the world itself had paused to witness the moment. Shadows flickered across the walls of her home, and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a promise, or perhaps a warning. Amina's hands trembled, but her heart was steady. This was her path. Her love, her loss, and her hope would guide her. The villagers would whisper, the fire would wait, and Amina would take the first step into the unknown. She did not yet know what she would face, danger, sorrow, or a miracle. But she knew one thing clearly. She could not turn back. The ritual was calling, and she would answer, even if it meant defying the natural order itself. The first light of dawn barely pierced the horizon when Amina rose from a restless sleep. Her body ached with grief, but her mind burned with determination. Today, she would begin preparing for the ritual that could bring Zahir back, or destroy everything she held dear. Each movement felt heavy, yet purposeful, as if the memory of him guided her hands. She began by gathering the objects that had been closest to Zahir, the tokens that had shaped their shared life. His worn journal, filled with dreams and sketches of future they had hoped to build together, rested gently in her arms. She collected the scarf he always wore during chilly evenings, the wooden flute he had carved with care, and the small trinkets he had collected from their travels. Every item carried his presence, every stitch and scratch a whisper of his love. Amina's chest tightened with a mixture of longing and sorrow as she held them, feeling both his nearness and the cruel absence that haunted her. Yet the ritual demanded more than personal belongings. She needed elements tied to fire, symbols of devotion, and herbs whispered to have mystical properties. With trembling hands, she scoured the small village and the edge of the forest, searching for rare herbs hidden beneath rocks or hanging from gnarled trees. Each discovery sent a shiver through her, as if the world itself were acknowledging her quest. The villagers noticed her actions, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe, fear, and suspicion. Some whispered warnings behind their hands. "It's dangerous," one said. "The fire does not forgive mistakes." Others shook their heads silently, casting uneasy glances at the young widow who dared challenge fate. Amina ignored them, her resolve hardened by grief. Every whisper, every doubt, only sharpened the edge of her determination. Her nights became longer and more restless. Alone in the small room she shared with memories of Zahir, she would trace her fingers over the objects she had gathered, remembering the way he laughed, the gentle press of his hand on hers, the warmth that had filled her world. Memories of their love, once comforting, now burned with a sharp intensity. She replayed moments in her mind. The first time they met, their quiet walks beneath starlit skies, the way he had held her through storms both literal and figurative. Each recollection brought tears and a fierce longing that was almost unbearable. Fear, hope, and guilt intertwined within her. Could she truly perform this ritual? What if the fire rejected her? What if she failed and lost Zahir forever? Or worse, brought harm upon him or herself? Her heart ached with the weight of choice, each beat a reminder of the cost she might have to pay. Yet, beneath the fear, a spark of courage flickered. She loved him beyond reason, and love demanded risk, even in the face of the unknown. Signs seemed to follow her, subtle and unnerving. A sudden gust of wind would scatter the herbs she had laid out. Shadows in the forest twisted in shapes almost human. Sometimes, she thought she heard a faint laugh that was not her own, and each time, her heart leapt with both hope and dread. The ritual was alive in some strange way, sensing her intentions, testing her resolve. Gathering all the components, Amina arranged them near the old stone hearth. The flames would need kindling, the herbs, the objects, and above all, the fire fed with intention and love. She knelt, tracing each item with her fingers, whispering words she did not dare speak aloud. She felt the weight of her choice pressing down on her, but also the warmth of determination growing like embers inside her chest. The more she prepared, the more she realized the true meaning of sacrifice. The ritual was not merely about reclaiming what was lost. It demanded everything from her: courage, faith, and a willingness to face consequences she could not yet imagine. Her mind flitted between the hope of reunion and the dread of loss, and in that tension, she understood the depth of love and grief, the two forces that now drove her forward. By nightfall, Amina was ready. The items were carefully placed, the firewood stacked, the herbs arranged, and her heart pounding with anticipation. She could feel Zahir's presence in every corner, in every flicker of shadow, in the whisper of the wind outside. The ritual awaited her, and with it, the chance to bridge the impossible divide between life and death. Amina closed her eyes, inhaling deeply the scent of wood, earth, and herbs. Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart was steady. This was the moment she had prepared for, the moment where hope and fear would collide, and where her love for Zahir would be tested against the merciless power of the fire. The night was silent, yet alive with possibility. The ritual could succeed or fail. But Amina had chosen her path. She had gathered what was needed, faced the warnings, and embraced the unknown. In the quiet darkness, she whispered a prayer to the wind, to the fire, to the universe itself. Bring him back, or let me know what I must do. With that, she rose, ready to face the fire, ready to confront the boundaries of life and death, and ready to test whether love could truly defy fate. Night had fallen like a velvet curtain over the village, shrouding everything in shadows and silence. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, as if nature itself held its breath. Amina knelt beside the hearth, her hands trembling as she arranged the carefully gathered items. Zahir's scarf, his journal, the wooden flute, and the rare herbs that whispered of mystical power. The stacked firewood lay ready, the hearth cold yet waiting, an empty stage for the drama of fate. Her heart pounded fiercely, a drum of fear and anticipation. She could feel the weight of the villagers' warnings pressing against her, yet she had silenced doubt with a resolve stronger than sorrow. This was her moment. The ritual demanded not only objects, but intention, faith, and love unflinching in the face of danger. Every fiber of her being ached with longing, and she whispered Zahir's name, letting it drift into the darkness like a fragile prayer. With careful hands, she struck a match. The flame caught the kindling, flickering into life, casting shadows that danced along the walls and the trees outside. The fire sputtered and roared, as if testing her courage. Amina shivered, but did not falter. She began the ritual, placing each item into the flames with deliberate care, her breath shallow, her pulse racing. The scarf went first, curling and blackening as it touched the heat. Then the journal, its pages fluttering before igniting, sending curls of smoke into the night. As the fire consumed the objects, Amina felt a strange vibration in the air, subtle at first, then stronger, a hum that seemed to resonate from the hearth itself. Shadows twisted in unusual shapes, and the flames flickered in colors that no natural fire had ever borne. Her pulse quickened. Something beyond ordinary was happening. She whispered words of longing, of love, of hope, feeling them pour from her very soul into the fire. The heat was intense, almost unbearable, yet she did not move, did not step back. Suddenly, the wind howled through the clearing, scattering the ashes and causing the flames to leap higher, as if alive. The herbs sizzled and crackled, releasing pungent, heady scents that made her eyes water. Amina felt her chest tighten. Was it anticipation, fear, or something more? Then, faintly, she thought she heard a voice. Just a whisper, barely audible, yet unmistakable. Amina! Her heart nearly stopped. Could it be him? Her mind wavered between hope and disbelief. She fell to her knees, reaching toward the fire, as if to touch the presence she felt surrounding her. Flames twisted unnaturally, forming shapes that seemed almost human. Shadows flickered across the ground, bending and stretching like living things. Amina's breaths came in ragged gasps, her hands shaking as she fed the fire with both objects and emotion, feeding her grief, her longing, her love. The ritual's power seemed to swell, the air charged with energy that made her skin tingle and hair stand on end. Outside the clearing, the forest seemed to hold still, as if every tree, every leaf were watching. Amina's mind was flooded with memories. Every moment she had shared with Zahir, every touch, every laugh, every word unspoken. She poured them into the fire, letting it consume not just objects, but her sorrow, her hope, her very heart. Then a sudden crackle split the air. The flames surged higher, brighter, and in that instant she saw him. Or rather, she felt him, a presence that made her knees buckle and tears spill down her cheeks. The temperature of the fire shifted, warm yet piercing, as if it were alive and aware. The wind circled her, carrying whispers of warning and promise, stirring the ashes into swirling patterns. Amina's fingers reached instinctively toward the hearth, wanting to touch the impossibility she sensed but could not yet see. Fear and wonder collided inside her. The villagers' warnings returned in her mind. Mistakes could be fatal, meddling could destroy, the fire does not forgive. Yet the thought of Zahir's return was intoxicating, overwhelming. Her tears fell into the flames, sizzling and hissing as if acknowledged. She could feel a pull, a connection stronger than anything she had known in life. Her love, her grief, her hope, all converged into the fire, binding her to the unknown. Then the unthinkable happened. The shadows shifted violently. The flames twisted upward in unnatural shapes, forming a vague outline of a figure. Amina's heart leapt. She dared to breathe, hardly daring to hope. The fire's heat was intense, almost unbearable, yet it carried a strange comfort. She whispered again, "Zahir, come back to me." The night seemed to stretch, time suspended in the thick, electric tension of possibility. Every crackle of the fire was a heartbeat, every flicker a whisper from beyond the divide. Amina's fear warred with her longing. What if this brought him back only partially, only as a shadow, a fragment? And yet, could she resist the pull of love that defied death itself? Her hands moved almost automatically, feeding the fire with objects, with prayers, with memory, with love. The wind, the shadows, the flames, they responded, alive in ways she could neither understand nor control. The forest outside groaned and whispered, and somewhere deep in her heart, she felt that the ritual had crossed the threshold from legend into reality. Amina fell to her knees in the ashes and heat, exhausted but unwavering. The ritual was no longer just a possibility. It was happening. She could sense it. She could feel him, just beyond the veil, calling her, waiting, tethered by the fire she fed with her heart. And in that charged silence, with flames dancing and shadows alive, the first thread of hope took hold. Zahir might yet return, and the impossible might become real. The flames had burned low, leaving behind glowing embers that crackled softly in the quiet night. Amina's hands trembled, her body drenched in sweat, yet her heart thumped with a fragile hope. She had fed the fire with her grief, her love, her longing, and now she waited, holding her breath, listening for a sign. At first, there was only silence, broken by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. Then, faintly, a shape began to emerge from the shadows at the edge of the clearing. A figure, tall and hesitant, stepped into the faint light of the dying fire. Amina's breath caught in her throat. The outline was familiar, the curve of shoulders, the stance she had memorized in every detail of their life together. "Zahir," she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure paused, head tilted, as though sensing her presence but uncertain of itself. Amina's heart swelled with a mixture of hope and fear. Could it really be him? Her husband, her life, her everything? As he stepped closer, she noticed subtle differences. The way he moved, slower in some gestures, sharper in others, his eyes distant yet searching. He was him, and yet not entirely. Tears streamed down Amina's face as she ran toward him, arms outstretched. "Zahir, it's me, Amina. It's me." He looked at her with confusion and longing, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. She reached for his hands, feeling the warmth of his skin, the pulse of life beneath her fingers. Relief and terror surged together. He was alive but changed. There was a gap in his memory, a flicker of something missing. Yet he was here. He was real. For a long moment, they simply clung to each other, trembling, crying, hearts beating as if trying to make up for the days lost. Every shared memory flooded back in fragments. His laughter, their quiet nights, the stolen kisses in the garden. But there were gaps, blanks that could not be filled. Amina realized that the ritual had worked, but not perfectly. The fire had answered her, yet it had exacted a price she could not yet see. Outside the clearing, the wind shifted, rustling the trees with an almost sentient awareness. Shadows stretched and twisted in the corners of her vision. The villagers, drawn by the unnatural glow of the fire, had gathered cautiously at a distance, whispering warnings. "It's unnatural," one murmured. "The fire has answered, but at what cost?" Amina's mind raced. She had brought him back, but something was different. His eyes, once full of certainty and warmth, now flickered with confusion. His movements were hesitant, as if relearning the world. And yet, each time he touched her, each time he looked at her with recognition, she felt the bond they had shared. Love was there, stubborn and unyielding, even if the rest of him was altered. Fear gnawed at her. Had she disturbed the natural order? Had she defied fate and opened a door that should have remained closed? The villagers' warnings echoed in her mind. "The fire does not forgive mistakes," they had said. And now she wondered if the ritual's consequences would reach beyond their reunion. Zahir tried to speak, his voice uncertain, unfamiliar. "Amina, what happened?" Tears blurred her vision as she realized how much he had lost and how much she had risked. She wanted to explain, to pour out the story of grief, ritual, and hope, but words faltered under the weight of emotion. Instead, she took his hand and held it tightly, grounding him, grounding herself. "It's me," she whispered. "We're here. We're together." Even as joy surged within her, doubts festered. Could this fragile miracle last? Had the fire taken something in exchange for his return? His memory, his spirit, some piece of the life they had shared? And what did the villagers fear? Had she brought danger not only upon herself, but upon them as well? The night seemed alive with tension. Every rustle of the trees, every flicker of the dying embers charged with meaning. Amina's love for Zahir warred with fear for the unknown. She wanted to rejoice, to hold him close and never let go. Yet a shadow of dread lingered, whispering that miracles might carry hidden costs. Still, she could not turn back. She had made her choice, faced the fire, and claimed the impossible. For now, she would focus on the fragment of life before her, on the warmth of his hands and hers, the echo of his familiar heartbeat. Love, fragile and fierce, had triumphed over despair, even if uncertainty shadowed its edges. Amina lifted his face gently, looking into his eyes, trying to anchor him in the reality of their love. "We'll face it," she whispered. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." For a brief, fleeting moment, the night seemed to still around them, the fire smoldering quietly as if approving of their union. Yet somewhere deep in the shadows, a tension lingered. The story was not yet over. The ritual had brought him back, but the cost and consequences were only beginning to reveal themselves. And so, in the quiet of that charged night, Amina and Zahir clung to each other, caught between joy and fear, hope and uncertainty, love and the heavy price of defying fate. Their reunion was real, but the path forward was shrouded in shadow. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together or fall apart trying. The dawn that followed the ritual was pale and fragile, as if the world itself held its breath. Amina sat beside the hearth, her hands still trembling, her heart caught between joy and fear. Zahir lay nearby, resting yet restless, his eyes open and unseeing at times, staring at nothing. The miracle she had risked everything for had occurred, but she could feel, with a gnawing certainty, that it had come at a cost she could not yet measure. As the day progressed, the truth began to seep in. Zahir's memories were fragmented. He recognized her, yet other pieces of their shared life, intimate moments, whispered promises, small routines, slipped from his grasp like sand through fingers. He looked at her with warmth and love, but there were gaps in a man she had known so completely. And in those gaps, a shadow of unease settled, a sense that the fire's gift was not without consequence. Amina confronted the reality she had tried to avoid. The ritual was more than a simple act of magic. It demanded sacrifice, though what exactly it had taken was still unclear. Objects, herbs, and intention had been consumed by flames. But she wondered if the fire had also taken part of Zahir's essence, or even something beyond him, something she could not see. The villagers' warnings echoed with new urgency. The fire does not forgive mistakes. One evening, as the last embers smoldered and the wind whispered through the trees, Zahir spoke, his voice hesitant but laced with emotion. Amina, I feel. I'm not whole. I remember you, but I'm not exactly myself. His hands trembled slightly, gripping hers. I feel gaps like pieces of me are missing. Amina's chest tightened. She had hoped for reunion, for joy, but now guilt and fear pressed upon her. Her love had brought him back, yes, but at what unseen cost? Every beat of her heart echoed with the possibility that the ritual might have taken more than she realized. Perhaps someone else had suffered, or perhaps the fire demanded a price yet unpaid. She realized she had a choice. To protect him, to restore him fully, she might have to risk something even greater. Perhaps her own life, perhaps the fragile threads of fate that bound their world. The fire had answered her plea, but it demanded courage, sacrifice, and perhaps even suffering in return. She could not falter now. Together, they ventured to understand what had been lost. Zahir attempted to recall fragments of his past, shared dreams, the quiet routines of their life. But each memory brought pain as much as comfort. In his eyes, Amina saw fear and confusion, but also the love that had survived death itself. She held him close, whispering reassurances, but the tension between hope and dread never fully left her heart. Amina began to realize that the ritual was not simply about bringing him back. It was about balance, about understanding that love demanded more than desire. It demanded courage, sacrifice, and acceptance of the unknown. Each night, she tended the hearth, feeding it with care, whispering her memories, offering prayers to stabilize the fragile thread that connected them. The flames danced, sometimes violently, as if testing their resolve, reminding them that miracles carried consequences. And then the revelation came, not in words but in sensation. The air around them shifted. Shadows moved with intent, responding to their emotions. The fire, once passive, now seemed alive, aware of their intentions. Amina felt it drawing on her courage, demanding not just love but action. If she wished to restore Zahir fully, she had to confront fear beyond grief, to embrace the possibility of loss again. The night grew tense with uncertainty. Zahir clung to her, and she to him, each heartbeat a fragile bridge across the unknown. She understood now that the fire had tested not only her love, but her willingness to sacrifice, to face consequences she could not predict. The ritual was more than magic. It was a trial, a mirror of the human heart itself, full of courage, fear, hope, and despair. Amina knelt once more by the hearth, placing her hand on the glowing embers. "I will do whatever it takes," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Take what you must, but give him back to me fully. Let our love endure." The fire flickered violently, as if acknowledging her words, and the shadows shifted into shapes both terrifying and beautiful. She could feel Zahir's presence fully now, the warmth of his life tethered to hers, but balanced on a razor's edge. In that moment, she understood the true meaning of sacrifice. Love was not only joy, it was risk, endurance, courage, and willingness to face the unknown. If she faltered, if fear overcame her, the miracle could collapse. But she would not falter. She would face the fire again if needed, confront any cost for the man she loved, for the life she refused to live without him. The night stretched long and uncertain, filled with crackling embers, shifting shadows, and the quiet hum of possibility. The revelation was clear. Miracles demanded more than desire. They demanded the heart's full commitment. Amina and Zahir clung to each other, poised on the edge of fate, ready to make the final sacrifices required. And in that tension, that fragile, electric balance between hope and danger, they realized love could defy death, but only if courage and sacrifice matched its intensity. The next step would decide not just Zahir's fate, but the measure of their love and the price they were willing to pay for a second chance. The first light of morning crept gently over the village, casting a golden glow on the hearth that had witnessed both despair and hope. Amina sat beside Zahir, her hands intertwined with his, feeling the steady pulse of life that had returned to him, fully at last. The nights of fear, the trembling rituals, and the sacrifices demanded by the fire had not been in vain. The fire had tested them, challenged the limits of love and courage, but now, the impossible had been made real. Zahir stirred, blinking against the sunlight, his eyes clearer than they had been since his return. "Amina," he murmured, voice steady, warm, familiar. He reached for her, and she felt the weight of every moment they had endured together. The loss, the ritual, the fear, fall away in the strength of their reunion. For the first time, the gaps in his memory no longer seemed like chasms. They had been bridged by love, patience, and sacrifice. Tears streamed down Amina's face as she smiled through the exhaustion. "I'm here," she whispered. "We're together, truly." The villagers had gathered at the edge of the clearing, their expressions a mixture of awe, caution, and reverence. They had watched her face the fire, confront grief, and navigate the impossible. Now, seeing Zahir alive, whole, and at peace, their whispers had shifted from fear to respect. The tale of the widow who fed the fire and triumphed would linger in the village for generations, a story of love, courage, and redemption. Amina arose slowly, helping Zahir to his feet. Their eyes met, and in that moment there was no need for words. Every touch, every glance spoke of endurance and commitment, of the trials they had faced and the bond that had emerged stronger for it. The fire had tested them both, demanding courage and sacrifice, but it had also revealed the depth of their love, love capable of challenging fate itself. The final act of the ritual, subtle yet profound, had been the surrender of fear. Amina realized that in offering herself fully to the fire, her longing, her grief, her hope, she had balanced the scale. Zahir's return was not a mere resurrection. It was a transformation. They were renewed, their love deeper, tempered by trial, and anchored in understanding that life's most precious gifts often demand the greatest courage. Hand in hand, they approached the hearth one last time. The embers glowed softly, remnants of a fire that had consumed loss and despair, and had returned them something more: wisdom, resilience, and a reaffirmation that love, when steadfast and true, could endure beyond the limits of ordinary life. Amina placed her hand lightly on the glowing stones, whispering thanks for the strength it had given her, and for the gift of Zahir's return. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the village and the forest beyond, painting everything in a golden light that felt almost sacred. The tension that had gripped their hearts for so long melted into calm. For Amina, there was closure, not in forgetting the pain, but in understanding that love had triumphed through grief, sacrifice, and courage. Every trial, every tear, every fear had led to this moment of redemption. Zahir looked at her, eyes full of gratitude and love. "You risked everything for me," he said softly. "For us. I don't know how to thank you." Amina shook her head, a soft smile breaking through the tears. "We are alive together. That is enough. We faced the fire, and we endured. That is all the thanks we need." As they walked together back toward the village, the villagers parted silently, some with awe, others with quiet relief. They had witnessed the power of love, the courage to confront the unknown, and the redemption that came from facing fear with unwavering heart. The tale of Amina and Zahir would become legend, a story of hope for those who dared to believe in miracles and the transformative power of love. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to rhythm, but nothing was quite as it had been. Amina and Zahir carried with them the memory of the trial by fire, the knowledge that love required both courage and sacrifice. Their moments of intimacy, once ordinary, now held extraordinary significance. Every shared meal, every touch, Every quiet word beneath the stars was a celebration of survival, devotion, and the triumph of hope over despair. And though the mystical fire rested quietly in the hearth, its lessons remained alive. Love, sacrifice, courage, and faith had guided them through the darkness. The ritual had ended, but the bond it revealed endured, a luminous thread connecting two hearts that had faced death and emerged transformed. Amina glanced at Zahir, feeling the pulse of life and love thrumming between them. She realized that the fire had not just returned him, it had returned them to each other, fully, forever changed but bound stronger than ever. In that realization, she found peace, redemption, and the quiet certainty that some love, when tested by loss and trial, is too powerful to be extinguished. The story of the widow who fed the fire had reached its conclusion, yet its meaning lingered, proof that love could survive beyond grief, that courage could overcome fear, and that redemption is born from the heart willing to sacrifice everything for hope. The village had returned to its quiet rhythm, but the story of Amina and Zahir lingered in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. By day, life appeared ordinary. Children ran through the fields, elders tended gardens, and the sun rose and set as it always had. Yet beneath the surface, a subtle reverence persisted, a reminder of what had transpired when love dared to challenge the boundaries of life and death. Amina sat by the hearth one evening, the glow of the embers soft against her face. Zahir rested nearby, reading quietly, the calm and warmth of his presence a balm to her soul. She traced her fingers across the stones that had once borne witness to her grief, her courage, and her unwavering hope. The fire had taught her a truth that went beyond magic. It had revealed the depth and resilience of the human heart. She thought of the journey she had endured, the unbearable loss, the whispers of the villagers, the dangerous ritual, and the sacrifices demanded by both love and fate. Every step had been fraught with fear and uncertainty. Yet through it all, she had learned that courage is born in the crucible of despair, and that love, when true and steadfast, can transcend even the finality of death. Zahir looked up, meeting her gaze with a tenderness that mirrored her own. "We are here," he said softly, "together. Because of you, because of us." Amina smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. She understood now that life and death, hope and fear, loss and redemption are woven together in ways that often remain unseen. The fire had been a teacher, a witness, a force that demanded honesty, devotion, and courage. And through it, she had found not only the return of her beloved, but a deeper understanding of the transformative power of love itself. The villagers continued to speak of her bravery in hushed tones, some in awe, others with cautious admiration. But Amina no longer feared their judgment. She had faced the unknown, confronted loss, and embraced sacrifice. And in doing so, she had discovered a truth that would guide her for the rest of her days. Love is not measured by its ease, but by its endurance, its courage, and its willingness to face the impossible. As night fell, she watched the embers glow softly, a reminder of the fire that had returned Zahir to her and, more importantly, had returned life and hope to them both. And in that quiet moment, she understood that some love, once proven through fire and sacrifice, can never be extinguished.